recorded, I suggest you leave the meeting now. Otherwise, it will be made available on the YouTube channel sometime in the near future. I haven't been too good on publishing these videos, but let's see if I can't find some time to do that. On to today's session. I'm happy to announce Scott Helmus with multi-report and navigation challenges in Power BI. I met Scott in Chicago last year. We shared a train ride, I think, from town to the airport.
That's right.
And got to know him. And I don't know what made you made the sessions to my user group, but I'm very happy that you did, because it's a very nice topic. So obviously, there was no doubt that we needed to host this session. Scott, you've been an MVP for 16 years. Let's just recap that. 16 years of MVP, that's a very, very long time. I don't think I know anybody local that has been an MVP for that long. I know the program is 25 years old, so you must have been one of the early invitees, so to speak.
Just a quick aside, in the world, there are 6 people who are MVPs for Visio primarily, and 3 of them are 20 plus years. So I'm one of the new kids.
Oh, you're the rookie. Okay.
Yeah.
Still, from my perspective, that's a long time in the program. And it also is an old product, Visio. And you've been writing books about it. And you've been in the industry for, a lot of years.
Yeah, very many.
So is there anything else you want to, announce about yourself?
I have one slide that has a couple of tidbits on it. I'll wait for that.
Okay. Well, then, without further ado, I'm handing over the mic to you, and I will be off camera while you're on. I will still be here. I'm monitoring the chat, but this is just to give you space, right? So if you need something from me, just yell out. I'm still here to assist in any way I can.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
Let me share my screen here, and you should see a title slide. First of all, thank you, Jens. I was happy to have you say yes, please come speak. That train ride was memorable. So obviously you made a good impression, which is the answer to the question, why did I apply to speak at this particular user group? So we had a good conversation on that ride out to O'Hare Airport. My interest in this particular topic is, and let me be clear about one thing. As Jens mentioned, my MVP status comes primarily from the Visio product. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about Visio today, but it's also part of my Power BI story as well. So just to establish that I'm really kind of new to Power BI. I've learned some things primarily because of this one specific project. And it was one of those great projects where the client was willing to pay me to learn something I didn't know much about Power BI, because they knew how much I knew and had helped them with Visio related matters. And when they learned that we could combine the two, they said, this is great, we need that. So it was kind of the ultimate luxury as a consultant to have a client willing to pay me to learn some things that I was excited to learn anyway, and then be able to apply them in the way that you're going to see. So this particular client is a multinational company, a global company that has many different divisions, one of which runs theme parks. And by agreement with them, I'm not allowed to name who that company is, but just that description narrows your choices down to a couple. And if you happen to guess, then so be it. But I do my best to not actually say their name during these couple of minutes that we're together. The idea, well, I'll hold off on the goal for this particular project for just a second longer, but it was through the learning that I was able to do as part of delivering a solution for this company that I put together some notes, and that's the basis for the presentation today. A lot of what this project involved was using the capability to embed a Visio diagram into a Power BI report. And so here are a couple of quick visual samples. Here's, for example, a flowchart or swim lane diagram embedded in a Power BI report. So you see some standard bar graph kinds of visuals and a Visio visual. Here's another one that happens to be a floor plan with some other visuals around it, some ways to slice and dice through the floor plan, and a retail store layout floor plan with sales data and inventory data on the right. Those are the kinds of things that were inspiring to me when I realized that that was what we could achieve for this particular client. And by the way, these 3 samples come from a set of 7 that Microsoft put together, and that URL you see in the upper right-hand corner, aka.ms/Visio PBI. By all means, that link will appear again at the end of my slide. So by all means, check that link out, because there are 7 really pretty good examples of some of what you can do. I, of course, think that what I'm going to show you is even better, but mine is not publicly available, courtesy of Microsoft. So if you're interested in a copy of my slides, that QR code or that bit.ly link will get you to a page where you can download a copy. I'll put that URL and that QR code up again at the end of the session. I mentioned Visio. I'm going to spend 6 or 8 minutes at the beginning here showing you a pure Visio example for this same client, mostly because I want to leave that with you as an idea. If partway through you say, I didn't know I could do that with Visio, then I will have succeeded. But that also is a good basis for understanding how the Visio visual in Power BI can work as well. Most of what we'll talk about is that Visio visual in Power BI, and see the specific example that I created for this client. And then Q&A, and I've got some slides at the end with some links to supplemental information that you should find helpful. This is the slide I mentioned. I've got a couple of bits about me here. The QR code in the upper right, if you want to connect with me or follow me on LinkedIn, please feel free to do so. Harvard Computing Group is my company here in the US, and we are principally business process consultants. More about that another time. We do make a Visio add-in called TaskMap, which is was created for building a specific style of content-rich process maps built into Visio. MVP, LinkedIn Learning courses, a couple of books, and that sort of thing. You know what? I'm going to ignore this poll. I forgot to activate it, so let's go right to the subject matter. I was going to ask a couple of poll questions just to get a sense for whether those of you in the audience are familiar with Visio's data handling capabilities in particular. But I'll, excuse me, we'll just take the fact that Visio can have data. In fact, every shape, for that matter, every object in a Visio diagram can contain data fields. The key to knowing about it is to open something called the shape data window. And that's what the slide shows at this point. If you right click any shape in Visio and select data and shape data, that will open something called the shape data window, which is normally closed by default. So that's why many people don't know that Visio objects can contain data. And so you'll see in this case, a set of 7 fields that are part of every flowchart shape in Visio. So if you've ever created a flowchart in Visio, or you've looked at a flowchart in Visio, whether you know it or not, every one of those shapes contains 7 data fields. They probably don't contain any data values unless someone specifically put them there, but the shapes are pre-designed with data fields. You can create custom data fields, not something we're going to talk about anymore today, other than the tip in the lower left for how to open this window that will let you add your own data fields to Visio shapes, but just be aware that you can. And then this all begs the question, which templates or which shapes in Visio do contain data fields? This is just a sample. This is not all of them by any means. But again, if you've ever created a flowchart or a swim lane diagram, a BPMN diagram, a floor plan, any of these kinds of diagrams, the shapes in these diagrams all contain predefined data fields. So your homework after this session today is to explore a diagram you're familiar with and right-click, select data and shape data, and see whether there are data fields in the shapes that you've been using. Once you know that there's data in Visio, it's kind of helpful to know that you can actually visualize that data right in a Visio diagram. You don't need any other tools. You don't need Excel. You don't need Power BI to get started. There are visuals like this that are built into Visio. So you can take a flowchart and annotate it with symbols that represent different aspects of different aspects of the data underlying the diagram. Good. I see a couple of comments in the chat about somebody who didn't know Visio was part of this session. Well, it is. It's sort of sneaking its way into the Power BI discussion. You might have an organization chart that you connect to your HR database because you want to not only see the organization chart, who reports to whom, but you also want to be able to, pardon me, you want to be able to visualize some of that HR data right there in the org chart. So we can see quarterly sales figures and how employees are doing against their training goals for the year by visualizing those elements right here in the organization chart. I see a question from Fernando in the chat asking about whether this requires a premium license. The way Visio is licensed, the subscription version of Visio is either Visio Plan 1 or Visio Plan 2, and it's Visio Plan 2 that has all of the capabilities that I'm describing here. Visio Plan 1 has an increasing percentage of the data capabilities, but right now, if you want to do anything serious with data in a Visio diagram, you need Visio Plan 2. If you have the old perpetual license version of Visio, which was typically packaged as Visio Standard or Visio Professional, then it's the Professional edition that has all of these features. And finally, one quick third example, a simple local area network diagram that has some servers in the diagram, and we're reflecting the status of the servers. So this diagram is connected to a data source that's providing the raw material, the raw data, that we are choosing to visualize here in the Visio diagram. And that brings up the final third point. So A, shapes can have data fields. B, when there is data in those fields, we can visualize that data. And C, the really important thing to know also is that you don't have to type the data into the Visio diagram shapes manually. You can link any Visio diagram to a data source. So if we take this diagram here, we can take data from Excel or Access or SQL Server, any Microsoft product that can store data, we can connect that directly to the Visio diagram. And even better for people who live in a world that includes Microsoft and non-Microsoft data sources, you can also connect via ODBC to virtually any database. So if you've got an Oracle database or Salesforce or just about any database, you can connect to it via ODBC and bring that data directly into your Visio diagram. The data, once you've connected, can refresh. So if those data sources refresh, the data in the diagram refreshes as well. And so that was a lot of the basis for what you're about to see coming up, both the pure Visio example and the Visio in Power BI example. Let me start with the pure Visio example, and this is going to be very quick. I've got a page here. So this particular company, as I mentioned, runs theme parks. This is a theme park. It happens to be one of the largest theme parks in the world in terms of geography, the number of acres that this park covers. And the challenge that the company faced is that they would send technicians out, network technicians or whomever, to fix things in the park. And the park is so big and one of many parks, and these technicians often work for a third party, not for this company itself. So they spend a lot of time just lost trying to find things. So we created a map in Visio, and let me zoom in. And by the way, I'm viewing this Visio diagram using nothing more than Chrome. If you store a Visio diagram in either OneDrive for Business or SharePoint Online, then anyone with a web browser can view that diagram. And like many of you, I suspect, when Microsoft says, oh yeah, any browser, anytime, any device, if you're old like me and you remember back to the Internet Explorer days, that phrase, any browser, really meant any browser just so it's called Internet Explorer. The really nice thing that happened about 5 or 6 years ago with Visio is the any browser, any device comment that I just made is 100% true. This diagram will look exactly the same in Safari on a Mac, on your iPhone or iPad, on my Android phone. It is a very faithful browser-based rendering of any Visio diagram. There's no conversion, there's no export. All you do is save the diagram in either OneDrive for Business or SharePoint Online. So put yourself in the position of a network technician who's been asked to go to a particular place in this park and fix a piece of equipment, replace a router or whatever the case might be. Well, he or she arrives in the parking lot down here, and makes their way to the entrance gate, which is this set of buildings right here. And then now they're in the park. Well, as you can see, there are hundreds of buildings in this particular park. 337, I think, is the number of buildings. That includes both buildings that guests see, but it includes a lot of the so-called backstage buildings, all the buildings that house equipment and whatnot that the guests aren't allowed to see or don't see. That's typically where a lot of this equipment is, which increases the challenge for these techs to find the right place. I did actually talk to one tech who said when he goes to this particular park that I'm showing you the map of, he plans to spend about 2 hours finding what he needs to find just to be able to do his work. So what we put into these maps was enough detail. The green dashed lines are walking paths. The black dashed dot line, mostly around the outer edges, are drivable roads. Obviously, you see water features, attractions, and so forth. Well, what I really want to show you is up here. Let's go to the top of the diagram page of the page. First of all, we included a legend because we wanted people to know what these colors represent that I'm about to talk about, see the legend for paths and roads and so forth. Our goal in this particular project was to help these technicians find what they're looking for, because there's lots of different kinds of equipment in lots of different buildings. So we can use the capability of visualizing data in Visio simply by turning buildings different colors depending on what kind of equipment they contain. And you'll see there are separate colors for individual equipment types. So a building like 1180 here is this sort of orange color. That means that building has entertainment equipment, the things that actually run the films or make them the entertainment visuals happen in the attraction. Another building like this green one has network equipment. This darker teal color in building 1260, building 1190, that's a building that has multiple kinds of equipment. So for the moment, all we know is that it has multiple kinds. We don't know more than that. Well, so this is a good start. This allows us to color and see the whole map of all the buildings for this park and understand essentially what's where. But the average technician is fixing one kind of equipment, so we wanted to provide additional pages that we can focus. And so here's a page that focuses just on security equipment. So the buildings that have security equipment may also have other kinds, but in this case, if a building has security equipment, it's the blue color and everything else is gray. Here's the page for entertainment or network equipment or attractions equipment or telecom equipment and so forth. So it's simply another tab, another page within the diagram. And by the way, I won't go into the details, but each of these, this is actually 8 copies of the same diagram. It's not different diagrams for each type of equipment. Inside the shapes, there's a formula that says, if I live on the page called network, then turn the shapes green. If there's network equipment, turn them gray otherwise. The same formula, just a series of conditions, the same formula says, if I'm on the telecom page, then turn the building yellow or gray. So the smart shapes, the data that lives in a Visio diagram is pretty powerful. All right. And again, just echoing the comment, Henrik says this is truly any browser. Hooray. And absolutely, this is true. It will look identical to this on your iPad or other device. So again, that's the pure Visio example. I hope to leave it with you to give you some ideas to think about in terms of what you can accomplish with nothing more than Visio in terms of visualizing whatever is important to you and your business. The other thing that I want to leave with you is that notion, that really critical notion that a shape can contain data, because we're now going to use that as we integrate Visio into a Power BI report and do some I think some fairly interesting things with Power BI. So the Visio visual, just quick background, is like other visuals in Power BI. You can drop one on your report page and wire it up to the data fields that you want to have it connected to. The Visio visual, behaves very much the same way. The key thing is that your Visio diagram shapes let me say that the other way. The shapes in your Visio diagram must contain data fields so that the names of the data fields in your Visio diagram can be matched with names of data fields in your whatever your data source or data sources are. So technically, you don't need a lot of data in your Visio diagram, but you at least need a field that serves as the data, as the key that associates a particular data field with a particular shape. And then we can do interesting things with it. I do have resources in the, or links in my resources slides at the end. If you want to explore more about this Visio visual, I've got some great places for you to look. So what were we trying to accomplish with this second project? The first one was about navigating through the parks for technicians repairing equipment. In this particular project, our goal was similar in that we wanted to bring data to frontline workers. We wanted to make visual the data about how they do their jobs and make it available to them in their hands as they're walking around the places where they work. The audience for this particular project was housekeeping supervisors and the engineers who maintain and work in resort hotels. So that's who is going to walk around. The company decided to give them Surface Pro in tablet mode, so they're carrying around a Surface Pro in a in a handheld protective case that has the strap on the back, so they can walk around much like you would want to if you want to be able to see data in the context of the building where you're walking. So Surface Pro tablets, that's a good thing. The database I'll talk more about in just a second, but this is a not huge, but a fairly substantial database with multiple million records in it that we wanted to be able to slice and dice and filter and make visual. We wanted to be able to provide seamless navigation from an icon that represents a theme park, and you see a couple of generic looking ones here, right down to we wanted to be able to drill through multiple layers of Power BI reports to get to a specific floor plan for one floor in a certain building of a certain resort in a certain theme park. So it's that visual style of navigation that we wanted to build. That, for those of you who've used Power BI, know that that's not a big challenge because you can build drill through and have multiple pages either within one report or drill through from one report to another. In our case, we had a collection of reports, and I'll talk more about that. The key challenges for me, A, because I was new to Power BI, and B, because there was a lot to take into account here. We wanted to build this drill through capability I mentioned. So we wanted the navigation to be as easy as possible because the housekeeping supervisors, the engineers, and even their managers in many cases aren't tech literate per se. That's not why they work for this company. They have other jobs to do. So we wanted the navigation to be as simple as possible. The data set that has the multiple millions of records in it needed to be shared among multiple reports. So we're not just visualizing that data in a single Power BI report. There were multiple reports. And part of the reason for multiple reports is because the Visio visual has a couple of restrictions at present, one of which is that any given Visio visual is connected to one specific Visio diagram. So in my case, I'm talking about floor plans. And because the Visio visual can only be connected to one page of a Visio diagram that is one floor plan, that means that if I have if I have a hotel with 12 floors, I'm going to have 12 pages in my Power BI report because each page needs to have its own Visio visual that's connected to the page of the diagram for that floor. There wasn't a lot of flexibility. I would love it if I could have a Visio diagram in the visual and just use a slicer to say, show me floor 7, show me floor 3. But unfortunately, the Visio visual doesn't work that way. So a 4-floor hotel required a 4-page report, 12 floors, 12 pages, and so forth. So what that means is that I've got not only multiple pages in any one report, but I've got a different Power BI report for each of the hotel properties. And by the way, I said at the beginning, and I'll say it again, I was a Power BI rookie going into this. So if any of you who are more familiar with Power BI have suggestions or ideas for anything I'm talking about today, I'd love to know about it. Just noticing a comment with is the Visio visual a standard visual? I'll actually show you how to find it. Just go into the Power BI place where you find additional visuals, type in the word Visio and it'll pop right up. I'll show you that. It does need to be downloaded, as Adam or Pavel said. Thank you. Do the Power BI report users need Visio licenses or just the developers? Good question. You, I am not. In fact, I tend to stay away from Power BI licensing questions as much as possible. On the Visio side, viewing a Visio diagram in a browser, as I talked about, requires no license of any kind. So you need someone with a Visio license to create a diagram that you're going to share via SharePoint or OneDrive for Business. But the people viewing it on their phones, their iPads, wherever, no license is required for viewing a pure Visio diagram shared in that way. For Power BI, I'm less certain exactly what the requirements are. I believe Power BI, there are some cases where you do need licenses for viewing and some where you don't. I'm not the right person to ask. So if someone else knows, please jump in and add your thoughts in the chat. One other challenge I had, and I'll show you this visually in just a second, but think about my 12-story hotel. That meant, as I've said already, I need to have 12 report pages, one for each floor in the hotel. I also have a drill through page that shows details about one particular room. So if I'm looking at floor 5, for example, and I want to focus on one particular room, I want to be able to drill through to the detail page and see details about that room. Well, it turns out that when you drill into a page or you move into a page, you can have a bookmark that resets all the filters on that target page. That's great. So you can have the details for a room caused by which ones you see or not see, caused by whatever filtering you've done as you drill into that room. But there's no way to, that I know of, there's no way to reset filters and slicers when you leave a page and go back to the floor plan, in this case, from the detail page. So I'll show you what I ended up putting together. And again, I'm looking for ideas here if someone has thoughts or suggestions about another way to do it. But these were what I encountered as key challenges getting started. And I'll show you how we solved each of them. Any good Power BI project starts with the data. So let's talk about the data that was involved here. There were two principal data sources. One I'll get to, that's the big one with lots of data. The other is structure. I created an Excel workbook that has the structure of these resort properties starting at the theme park level. So here's some generic data that says, okay, we have two theme parks, Park 1 and Park 2. The next tab in that spreadsheet shows which resorts exist within each park. So we're just drilling down here in terms of the hierarchy from theme parks down to a hotel room. Within each resort, there are multiple hotels and other types of buildings as well. We've got a convention center, restaurants, and so forth, but it was the hotel properties that we were most concerned with. Within any one hotel, there may be one or more buildings. So here, for example, HL1, Hotel 1, consists of 5 buildings, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You'll actually see that on a map in a moment. Hotel 2 has four buildings, Hotel 3 and so forth. Hotel 4 consists of one building with 9 floors. And so that's, again, we're just drilling down here. Now we're looking at the building level. Within any given building, there are one or more floors. So we have a place in our hierarchy for floors. And finally, we get down to rooms. And this is the table that has a lot more entries than the others because there's a row of data for every room. So this was simple, straightforward. I just needed to understand what the hierarchy was so that I could set up Power BI filters to be able to navigate among these various levels in the corporate hierarchy. I will point out one other thing. You'll notice that a couple of these tables have a field called a link. There's a hyperlink to a Power BI report. I'll talk about why those are there, but I just want to point those out now. So when I refer to that, the published link in each of these tables, you'll understand what I'm talking about. Here's my all-time favorite name for a data source. This hotel company, like many, Hilton and Marriott and others around the world, use a company called Amadeus and a particular product of theirs called Hot Sauce. I used to sit in early meetings with this client, and I'd hear people talking about hot sauce and quickly realize they were not talking about what they'd had for lunch yesterday and how they had added, added something to their lunch. Hot Sauce is the hotel service optimization system. So Hot Sauce is the data source. The data lives, in their case, in Snowflake. So a cloud database. I looked at the fact that I was going to have one report, one Power BI report for every hotel property. And we had a number of conversations about how do we have access to this data in Snowflake without replicating it in every report. Because as many of you know, the default, in fact, in most Power BI reports is that when you connect to a data source, you import the data. So if I had only one report, that wouldn't be a problem. But I had a dozen reports at least, and every one of those, if I import the data, was going to have that set of multiple million data records for each is stored in each of these reports. By the way, let me just go back for 1 second. I should mention that the reason there are millions of data records is that Hot Sauce has an entry in it for the Hot Sauce database has an entry for every time someone touches a room. So a housekeeper, like the one in the picture here, if a housekeeper enters a room, that gets an entry in the database. And in fact, the time in and time out is clocked using a prior system, a handheld device that they use for that purpose. If a guest calls and says, I need towels, if a guest calls the front desk and says, I need a late checkout, if an engineer is called to the room because the air conditioning needs to be fixed, both the call to the engineer or entering the service order for the engineer and the engineer entering and fixing something, those are every time the room is touched. Even something as simple as Uber Eats or DoorDash arrives at the hotel and says, I have food for a room in guest 347, that gets an entry in the Hot Sauce database as well. So that's why there's a lot of stuff in this database. Importing the entire database into a dozen or more reports didn't make a lot of sense. So another alternative, for those of you who are familiar with using Direct Connect, sorry, I forgot my animation there to show the updates that happen from Snowflake and then would need to be pushed into every copy of the database if we just import it into each report. Another option we considered is using a direct mode in Power BI, where there is basically one copy of the data that is in Snowflake, and then each report, every time we slice or dice or ask for something, a different view in the report, then there are interactions back and forth, direct queries to that database. We save space. We don't have the database replicated in a dozen places, but there's a moderate amount of network traffic that we had to consider whether that was a reasonable thing to do for all these housekeepers walking around with Surface Pros wandering through hotel resort. What I ended up doing that seemed to make a lot of sense, and again, I love feedback if others of you have tried this or other scenarios, there's a feature in Power BI that allows you to import the data into one Power BI report. And this Power BI report, in actuality, has the data in it and nothing else. The report page is more or less blank. It doesn't actually have to have anything on it. I put one or two visuals on it just to give me a record count and a few other things. But basically, this report exists solely for the purpose of being a data source. The other reports all use that Power BI report as their data source. So the advantage we gain is that there's one place where the data lives inside one Power BI report. All of the other Power BI reports just get their data from the one that's in the center of the screen. And updates then happen once to the central Power BI report and appear automatically. The data appears automatically in the other reports. And this turns out to be not only very efficient, but saves the space of having really just one copy of the data. So the Visio visual. Somebody asked in the chat how to get it. Well, here's how. You go to the Power BI and you say, I need a new visual. You type in the word Visio and you will see it appear. And when it does, it will add itself to the available visualizations. So in addition to Python and bar charts and other things, you can see that the Visio visual is there. What that looks like in real life is this. So here is, let me get, here's a Power BI report under development. So we've got some typical looking slicers and a scatter diagram and so forth here. If we zoom in, you'll see that there is right here the Visio visual. So I've already done the search by clicking the ellipsis and searching for it and added Visio. So it works very nicely, very quick, very easy to find it. And it's free, by the way. There is no additional cost. So just showed you what that looks like. The end result is a Visio visual like this process map here and whatever other visuals you want to include, and they are linked by their data. So clicking on a shape in the Visio visual will cause other filters to react. Clicking a filter outside the Visio visual will update the Visio diagram. So a couple of thoughts. When you use the Visio visual, one restriction at the moment is that the page of the Visio diagram that you want to have included in your visual must be saved either as a separate diagram, so a diagram that consists of one page, or you can, if you have a multi-page Visio diagram, just make sure you save the diagram with that one page as the active page, because the Visio visual, when you point it at a Visio diagram, will always just look at what was the active page when that diagram was saved. It's generally easiest to have a one-page diagram and use that as the source. That way there's never going to be confusion about what diagram it is that will appear in your Visio visual. I showed you at the very beginning that you can, in the park navigation map, we used a color by value graphic, and I showed you a couple of slide examples of having other ways to visualize data in a Visio diagram. Power BI ignores all that. So Power BI essentially turns off whatever visualizations you've put into your Visio diagram because it knows that you're going to build your own in Power BI. So it's great to know that you can do visualization right in Visio, but set that knowledge aside. You don't need that for right now. Power BI is going to ignore whatever you do. Gradient fill colors in Visio diagrams don't render as well inside the Visio visual, so minimize the use of those. Themes in Visio can add all kinds of bright colors and whatnot. Minimize the themes or use a more subtle theme or choose no theme in your Visio diagram. Again, it will improve the rendering and the rendering speed of the Visio visual in Power BI. And there also are some limits on shape counts. There are also plenty of workarounds available, including a couple that I've documented both here and in the resources at the end of the presentation. The next challenge I needed to deal with was how to provide the level of navigation, the drill down navigation that the client was interested in, and do so in a way that also made it easy for people and allowed us to maintain the links behind the diagrams. Because unfortunately, one of the things that the client told me is that they didn't know exactly where these diagrams were going to be stored permanently. So if we were linking to them and they had to move them, we needed to not break everything if we could. So we did try to do the best job we could of that. And that's actually why there are URLs stored in my Excel structure diagram, the slide that I showed you a couple of minutes ago. One of the things I learned about Power BI as I was getting started was bookmarks are incredibly useful in Power BI. You can create bookmarks that save the state of a page. And that way, every time you use that bookmark to return to that page, the page will be restored to exactly the combination of slicers and whatever that you want to be able to see. That's really helpful. I did find that working with bookmarks was a little touchy. You had to be very careful. I found also that not using the default names that Power BI assigns to bookmarks was a major thing that helped me. By assigning really meaningful names to my bookmarks, I could remember what they were, because I ended up with multiple dozen bookmarks in most of these reports. There's a setting in Power BI that allows you to sync a set of filters from one page to the next or across all pages in a diagram. I ended up using that because what I found was if I am looking at the third floor of a hotel and I'm slicing and dicing and looking at a particular view of the data, often I want to see the same thing on the floor above or the floor below. So by syncing the filters and slicers across pages, I could set them on the page I'm looking at now, click to the next page or any other page in the diagram, any other floor in the hotel, and see the data filtered the same way. Because I knew I was going to have a separate report for each hotel, I worked really hard to create a Power BI template that I could then use as the starting point for the next hotel and the next hotel. And a big part of that template was having all of the named bookmarks preset for multiple floors and setting sync across all floors, because I didn't want to have to do that every single time. Renaming and renaming the bookmarks was tedious. So creating a good template as your starting point, if you're going to have to replicate what you're doing across multiple Power BI reports, was a huge time saver for me. I mentioned the challenge of what happens when we have this situation. So I've got a Power BI report for a hotel that has just, let's call it 4 floors in the case of what's on the slide. And I've got one detail page. So on any one of those floors, I want to be able to pick a particular room and say, show me the details for this room. And that works great. I can have bookmarks set up so that all the filters pass to the detail page and the detail page knows what floor of which building and which room we're talking about. That's great. The challenge is that going the reverse direction is not quite so easy, because you can't, in Power BI, in any way that I know about, you can't force filters to be reset as you exit a page and go back to some other page in the report. So I found one guy, a MVP for Power BI, who happens to live in I believe it's either Oregon or Washington State in the Northwestern United States, who wrote a blog article that solved the problem. And that is by having a hidden visual, and I'll show you that in just a second. What do we have? About 10 minutes left. A hidden visual, you can actually accomplish what Power BI by itself can't do by setting filters on exit. More about that in just a second. So this is what my report looks like. Let's go there. Let's take a look at the actual report itself. I mentioned the navigation. So here is, let's go to full screen. Here is the very high level. So in the real map, of course, these are logos of parks, theme parks that you would probably recognize, but I've just got generic theme park looking icons here. So let's go to Park 2. So there's a URL there that leads to another page in the same report, as it turns out. And here's the theme park. Within this theme park, there are multiple resorts. So let's go to Resort A. And now we're drilling down and we see a map of this resort. This particular resort has 5 hotels. Each of the hotels has multiple buildings. As I've mentioned, my structured data tells me this, or I built my structured data from maps like this, so I knew exactly what was on the ground. And then now we're at a point where I can say, let's drill into one of these places. Let's go to Hotel 1. At this point, we're still in the same Power BI report that has these navigation maps in it. We're about to go to a second Power BI report, a Power BI report that is specific to this particular hotel. And so we're going to follow that URL that's embedded in my structured data in Excel in order to get to the particular hotel Power BI report. I wanted to make it easy for someone who's at this level to either go to a specific floor. So if I'm a housekeeping supervisor and I know I want to visualize what's on floor 3 in building 4 in this hotel, clicking on the gold box and then clicking go to selected floor will do exactly that. On the other hand, if I just want to go to the report for this hotel and I don't know yet where, if I click anywhere in the background, I put a separate URL there. So now click and we're looking at the report for that particular hotel. And clicking on the map takes me to what I consider a visual table of contents. So we're now looking at this Power BI report. You can see the filters over here on the right, where looking at Resort A, Hotel 1. So those are the filters that are set in Power BI for this report. And this visual table of contents is arranged so that the housekeeping supervisor or the engineer can say, oh, okay, building 1, building 2, yeah, it's floor 2 and building 2 where I want to go. So I'm just going to click here. And then now we're looking at the specific Power BI report for this floor in this hotel. And I can do things like, I'm a housekeeping supervisor. I want to see all the places where a housekeeper was sent back to a room. So they'd done their work and then had to go back. Well, I can see that for this particular time period, we've got 4 rooms in this wing and 3 rooms in this wing. If I'm the housekeeping supervisor, I'm going to know whether this is good or bad. But for me right now, just exploring the data, I'm thinking, well, it seems odd that a housekeeper would have to go back to the room that many times in those 2 wings. Is this a recurring problem? I've got a time slicer down here. We're looking at 1 week's worth of data right now. How about the previous week? Oh, that looks much better. No instances the previous week. What about the week before? A couple in that corner of that floor. But you know what? It's apparently this particular problem was something unique to this week. I have insight now about the operation of this floor in this hotel and the housekeepers on this floor that I didn't have before in any convenient way. If I am an engineer, let's reset here. If I'm an engineer, I can turn off the housekeeping view, turn on the engineering view, and I can look at things like, how many times did we have an air conditioner that was too hot? Well, not many. How many times did we have an air conditioner that had broken parts? Well, a couple of them, a couple of those. How many times did we have a shower that needed to be repaired? And where was that? Not only for last week, but the week before, I can slice by months and quarters, and I can get, for example, let's take the quarter view here. How about this quarter or the previous quarter? I can see visually. And what's great, think about this as an engineer. I'm looking at a plumbing issue on this floor, and I realize that I've got a cluster of rooms where there's a leak. I want to look at the floor above, and I want to look at the floor below. I could have done that by going through reams of reports after the fact, but now I've got this data in my hand and I'm visualizing it right there on the screen. So that's just a quick touch view of how of what these housekeeping supervisors and engineer have available now. Let me go to Power BI and do a couple of quick things as I wrap up. Thank you, Henrik. It doesn't look like a newbie Power BI report. Well, there was some blood, sweat, and tears to get to this point, but truly, I'm not making this up. I had used Power BI maybe twice just to experiment with it before I started this project. But again, it's that luxury of having a client with a vision and the willingness to let me explore along the way to create something that's useful for them. So thank you for for noticing. But so how does the Visio visual work? We simply, I clicked on something unintentionally here. I'm not sure what I got here. I got a visual I don't want. Let me delete that. Let me click on the Visio visual. Let's drag it onto the page and expand it a bit here. How do you get this visual in here? Well, I'm going to take the room number because that's going to be the key here. I'm going to drag that onto the report. So that'll be the key value. And then the data values I'm going to want are a special measure that I created for that color by value. So let's drag that and add it to the value section here. Meanwhile, the Visio visual is prompting me for a link. And the key is right here. It says, open the diagram in a browser, copy and paste the URL. That's all you have to do. So you put your Visio diagram in OneDrive or SharePoint, as I mentioned before. Simply go to your browser, open the diagram, capture the URL, paste it right here, and you're done. And what you end up with then is something that looks like the report that we saw just a second ago. That is this. So this visual is pointed to one specific Visio diagram, and the rest of these are all connected to it via the data. One last thing before I depart, I mentioned this problem of drill through, and let me reset and drill through in the remaining moment here. Let's take room 2214. I'm going to actually expand this so we have a couple of weeks worth of data, and take room 2214, we can see that we have 16 issues over this 4-week period in this room. One limitation of the Visio Visual, it doesn't support drill through. I would love to be able to right click on this room 2214 and drill through to my room detail page. This scatter plot down here exists really just for the benefit of being able to zoom in, because the scatter plot does support drill through. And by the way, you might wonder why that dot is so big. Think about the housekeeping supervisor with a Surface Pro and a finger. That's the drill through, is to touch and hold, or in my case, right click, and drill through to the room detail page. Now we're looking at this room on this floor in this hotel in this resort, and we can see specific data, including the names of all the people. Now you notice everybody who works for this company is named Smith. Obviously not in real life, but that's my anonymized data. And I can see what was the deal for this housekeeper. She did one issue, or he did one issue. Jose did one thing, and it did two things in Jose's case, and it took approximately 11 minutes. The trick to get back to the pages and reset everything is this blog article, the link for which you'll see in just a second. If I'm going to go back to floor 2 in building 2, I'm actually following a bookmark here. If I go to Power BI, I'll show you what's behind the scenes here, and that is a hidden visual. If I go to View and Selection, if I look at the selection pane here, you notice there's a completed by visual that's hidden. So let me click and show that. This visual is one that has people's names in it. And if I reset, I should see, there we go. It has people's names in it. I don't want to see people anywhere except on the room detail page. So back here we have this completed by, who did the work. The only place the client wanted to see this was on the detail page. And so in order to reset it, I had to create this bookmark that resets that visual, but I don't want to see that visual on this page, but it has to be here for the bookmark to work. So that's why this visual is hidden. It's there, but it's hidden. I realized that was probably more confusing than valuable, but that's why I have a resource page. So summary, we found a way to solve these problems. I'll let you take a look at these, and feel free to download the slides. I'll put that QR code up in just a second. But yep, we talked about Visio. You can reread these. Here's the important thing. If you want to know more about Visio, that first group of links is Microsoft published information. This second group, 4 of the 6 Visio MVPs publish blogs regularly, 1 in French. Those are great sources of information about Visio. Power BI specifically, here are 2 Microsoft articles that are terrific. David Parker is the Visio MVP who jumped on the Visio Visual in Power BI with both feet very early on. He's done some great work. There's both his blog and an example diagram of his. And then here's the information about using a shared data set as your source, as I talked about, moving my Snowflake data into a Power BI report and then having that be the data source for my other reports. And this is the article from the Visio MVP in the Pacific Northwest part of the United States. Here it is. And this is that article that will tell you how to effectively reset filters on exit from a page. And that is that. There's some more information about me, but here's the download link and contact information for me. And with that, Jens, I've run over a minute or two, but back to you.
Yeah, that's perfectly okay. When the content is good, we're all ready to listen. So I think there's a couple of questions, maybe. So how did you put the conditional columns onto the rooms is one question.
Good point. I did not show that, but the Visio Visual in Power BI has 2 options for visualizing data that are built in. One is color by value. So you assign a data field and then assign colors to a range of values. And it's actually, let me go to Power BI here and I'll show you the basics, because it's pretty straightforward actually. There is here a little flyout, and this is where that happens. So color by value, I want green for this set of values, this range of values, yellow and red.
Okay.
The other choice, in addition to color by value, is to visualize as text. Where, oh, I've lost where that setting is. It's somewhere in here. I'm not finding it at the moment. You can display a data value as text in the visual. So for example, if I happen to put the room numbers into the Visio diagram, but you could display room number as a text field on the diagram right in Power BI, or any other value for that matter. So good question. Thank you.
So there's another question on licensing, and I think we are settling on the fact that it's down to Power BI licenses, because from your point of view, it's the creator of the Visio diagram that is having to have a Plan 2 license. And
for Visio, yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
so every consumer can actually see that. And depending
Correct.
on how you
No
access Power BI, it's either free if you have a premium capacity, where I'm
Thank you.
not quite sure it's the premium per user license. I don't know about that one.
Okay. Thank you. Those names sound familiar. I remember hearing about premium capacity and sundry other things like that. But yeah, again, I I was able to stay away from licensing questions for the most part. So
Yeah, okay. So as Peter mentioned, with the introduction of Fabric, that is an F64 SKU that you need in order to have that premium capacity experience.
okay.
So if you are lower than F64, you're not getting that, what you get from premium capacity today.
Okay.
Final question, I think. How did you make the date filter to work with the week button?
Oh, thank you. It was a different date filter. The one that's normally that's built into the visuals in Power BI worked partly. Let's go back here. It was okay, but it wasn't letting me it wasn't giving me the flexibility that the client needed. And so these buttons and it didn't include things like a button that automatically takes me to this month or last month. This is a different slicer. I should remember the name of the company. In any event, it's a third party date slicer that is
Another
available.
custom visual. Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. All right, but thank you for an amazing presentation. I'm sure that there's a lot of people that actually learned something about Visio and how to interact with Power BI, and that's a great step, right? So I guess there's a lot of people sitting with process management and so on where they can actually benefit from this knowledge.
I hope so. And feel free to contact me. That's the reason my email is here, and I'm happy to answer questions or take suggestions, either one.
Yep. Okay, so I will ask for your slides as well afterwards, and I can share them with the group.
Okay.
But other than that, I think we're good on time and good on content. So thank you very much, Scott, and hope to see you soon again.
Yeah, absolutely. Take
And
care, everybody. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.
Great. Well, thank you very much for hosting. I appreciate it. Looks like we had a pretty good audience. There were 60 some odd people at one point, I think I noticed.
71, I think, was the top. Yeah, so pretty good. Usually it's about 50% show up. So that matches somewhat the expectations.
Yeah. Oh, I know. In fact, I've come to know that even 1/3 at times is pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes.
Yeah.
But this, I had a questionnaire going on in the user group at some point, which would be the most beneficial time slot. And this was actually the one. People can go grab some lunch and then sit in quiet somewhere and tag along.
Right. Yeah, that's good. That's smart.
Yep.
Good way to do it. Well, thank you. Have a good rest of your afternoon, and I'm going to go have breakfast.
Yeah, thank you, and have a good day.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.